let's be honest with you, the only thing these nations have going is that they're safe and they're tax-free. That's really it, safe and tax-free. Okay, if you remove any of those benefits, like if you suddenly start taxing people the same amount, people are going to leave. If you suddenly become unsafe, people will leave. That's the issue we have here.
If you knew what you were made of, then we would save the world.
But I am going to tackle the subject of Dubai to begin with, and I stumbled across this really good video actually that I want to kind of like watch with you guys. It's called Dubai's Mass Exodus Has Started. It's Worse Than You Think. And it's by a company called Statris. So this actually isn't a YouTuber, and it isn't necessarily a professional documentary outfit or even a news channel. It's a private organization, but they take the wealth and investment approach into looking at this question mark of Dubai and whether or not, you know, Dubai's economy can recover from this conflict that was started by President Trump, well, I should say started by Netanyahu in the Middle East and backed by President Trump, and the totally needless conflict that's taken place, but the effect and the impact that it's going to have on not just the global economy, but actually the GCC nations, these, you know, these Gulf nations, you know, the usual suspects being, you know, Dubai, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, yeah, the I should say the Emirates rather than Dubai. These nations are all going to see a substantial impact, negative impact to their economies. And actually that entire portion of the world might become incredibly unpopular and unattractive as a result of this. So this is a conflict that could see a complete shift in the way the world trades. It puts Africa in terms of oil back on the map, and obviously Nigeria with its refineries now, the fact that Nigeria now has the capability to export refined oil is a big deal.
Hit by a missile fragment.
A drone attack hit Dubai airport. The fighting in the Middle East is worsening on several fronts.
It's another blow to the UAE's reputation as an oasis for business and pleasure.
Dubai is over. That's what a wealth manager in Singapore told me this week, between two calls from clients trying to move millions of dollars out of the Gulf. And yet, 2 weeks ago, Dubai was the #1 destination for relocating millionaires on the planet. Almost 10,000 moved there last year alone, bringing $63 billion with them. The pitch was simple: zero income tax, zero capital gains, world-class infrastructure, and one unspoken guarantee. Whatever.
Dubai is, as you all know, a very popular tax haven. I know several individuals, rich individuals who live in Dubai. In fact, it just seems to be a trend when you reach a certain economic strata, you decide, I'm going to go and live in Dubai now. It makes perfect sense. You don't pay tax on your income. You live a relatively safe life. The weather's good. Well, a little bit extreme, but I'd say the weather's good all year round, and you have a state that doesn't really interfere with you unless you want them to, essentially. So yeah.
Whatever happens in the Middle East stays in the Middle East. I don't know if Dubai is really over, but what I can tell you is this. Right now, across Hong Kong and Singapore, private bankers and corporate service firms, just like Statris, are working day and night processing transfer requests from people who considered Dubai the safest place on earth until last February. Millionaires, entrepreneurs, expats, all of them doing something Dubai had never seen before: living. Not for vacation, not for a business trip, but for good, paying any price just to get out. What broke wasn't the skyline. It was the promise. I'm going to show you exactly what's happening behind the scenes, who's leaving, where the money is actually going, and what this means if you run a business connected to the Gulf. And let me tell you that the next 10 minutes might change how you think about where your business actually belongs. What's happening?
So what's really good about this documentary, as I'm going to let it play, is that, you know, sometimes our eyes are only open to the conflict, okay? And we're like, okay, well, Dubai's infrastructure has not been massively damaged. Yes, they had some bombing at the airport, but what this documentary uncovers is the impact that it has on the population, and then the amount of investment that is leaving Dubai. And it's actually quite a catastrophic amount, because let's be honest, who wants to be in a war zone or near a war zone or in a place where war is even a rumor? If you're a millionaire, if you're rich, if you're wealthy, you're not going to choose that as your domicile. You're going to pick somewhere that is safer. So right now, President Trump has opened a massive can of worms for a place where a lot of rich Westerners are residing in this land for the specific reason of it being a safe place, and they are all leaving now. So even if the war was going to end tomorrow, a lot of them aren't going to come back. A lot of them aren't going to be interested in coming back. It's now become too volatile. The region has become volatile. This is the part of the Middle East that has never experienced this kind of violence before. So like I said, chickens coming home to roost. Dubai may not have been a target if historically they hadn't shown themselves, like the other surrounding GCC nations, to be such willing stooges for the West. But it's that willfulness to allow the West, to allow America to have military bases. By the way, Qatar has a huge military base in it, as do many of these nations, that has made them a target. So it's like, you know, there was a period of time when this is, you know, that they're going to be allowed to prosper, but then that period of time has expired, and now they're being exposed to essentially what they sowed to. They're reaping what they sowed to. It's quite funny. Someone left a comment, I think in this video, that said, I always thought of Dubai as a temporary nation. And I just found that I found that quite fitting. It's like, yeah, it feels like that when you go to these places. It's like, yes, they've built these cities up, and literally these cities pop out of the sand. You'll leave your house one day, there'll be nothing. You leave your house, you know, a week later, and there's 2 skyscrapers. That's literally how quick stuff just goes, just pops up out of nowhere. But, you know, as they say, easy come, easy go. These places don't feel like they have any antiquity. They don't feel like there's any connection to the people, to the soil. And bear in mind, a lot of these Middle Eastern nations, these Gulf regions in particular, are not ruled by the indigenous. They're ruled by plants that were placed there by the British Empire. Okay, so a lot of these Arab nations and these people who classify themselves as Arabs, many of them are from the Turkish region, most of them are from India, and Qatar, the royal family, are historically Indian. So you have all of these people from various parts of the world who aren't even tied to the soil of that land. They were just placed in power by an exiting British Empire, which is quite interesting.
Right now is going to reshape international business for years. This channel covers exactly that, where entrepreneurs are moving, why and how to get it right. We cover the stuff nobody explains clearly. Subscribe right now if you want a real picture, not just the brochure. On February 28, Iran hit Dubai with 137 missiles and 209 drones. You've seen the footage. What you probably haven't seen is what happened inside the business community in the 72 hours that followed. The airport shut down. Dubai's airport isn't just an airport. It's the connective tissue of the entire emirate. When that closed, it didn't just strain tourists. It froze deal flow. Jebel Ali port caught fire. The port is where physical goods enter and leave the Gulf. Many Hong Kong-based companies that use Dubai as a logistic hub saw their shipments frozen in warehouses. Carriers simply refuse to route.
And just to add to that, think about this on a very practical level. The airport being bombed is terrifying if you're a resident. Absolutely terrifying. Who's going to want to use an airport that was bombed? I don't care if it was bombed last week, last month. I'm going to be like, okay, I need to travel in or out of this nation, but the airport, the very place that I would go to get my plane, like who wants to be mid-flight when missiles come down or on the runway? This is the risk that people are going to be running over and over again in their mind. And many of these places, these are small nations, so they don't have multiple airports. It's not like, you know, England with its, you know, 4 London airports and then loads of other airports in different parts of the world, and this, in different parts of the land. And this, these are small. A lot of them just have, you know, Dubai just has Dubai International Airport. That's really the one. That's really it. You Doha has Doha International Airport. There's not much more than that. So this is a big deal.
Route through the Gulf. 60% of Dubai's revenue comes from its port and its airport. On top of that, the banking system glitched. Amazon's cloud data center in Dubai got hit by a shrapnel from an intercepted drone, possibly the first time in history a major company's cloud infrastructure was damaged in a war. That triggered technology outage that rippled into banking operation. Two founders I know, both running trading companies between Dubai and Singapore, tried to transfer over $100,000 each to Singapore for risk hedging right after the attacks. The system.
Also, the bombing of data centers, I'm not sure if people realize how much of a big deal this is. We've had them bombed in Dubai, but they've also been bombed in the Little Hat Nation. That's a big deal. This is like internet infrastructure, especially Amazon. Because a lot of people thinking Amazon in the shop, but Amazon are the biggest provider and have been for decades now of web servers for the internet. Most of the internet is hosted on Amazon servers. They run a service called the AWS service, which is the Amazon Web Servers. So, I'm using StreamYard to stream this. Most large internet organizations host on Amazon servers. There's not like, if you're a big organization, you don't really host on private servers like you used to. Back in the day, you used to have your little computer and you would host your internet site from your office. Someone would come set up servers. No one does that anymore. Everyone uses cloud services. They're faster, they're more cost effective, and also they're more robust. They can scale with the popularity of a website. Okay, so there's not many of these big web services out there. The two biggest ones are Google and Amazon. They provide the backbone, the infrastructure for the internet, and then you got other ones, but they're kind of like at varying sizes. So Amazon's data center being targeted, this isn't a small deal. This is a big deal. This is potentially potentially could see parts of the internet start to disappear if they manage to target more than one of these data centers, because yes, they should have them backed up in different parts of the world. But if this problem scales, it really could change the way people are communicating. This is a massive deal. So there's a lot of firsts happening in this whole bunch of firsts,
Wouldn't let them. One eventually got through via a different UAE bank. The other had to wait. And then there's the part nobody talks about on the news. The UAE imports 90% of its food. Iran, one of its main suppliers of fresh produce, banned all food export until further notice. Shipping through the Strait of Hormuz, where 20% of the world's oil and a huge share of the region imports travel, dropped 90%. The UAE government says it has 4 to 6 months of food reserves. That's reassuring until you remember.
And that's an empty promise, saying, oh, we have 4 to 6 months of food reserves. Well, you have 4 to 6 months of food reserves for food that stores for 4 to 6 months. But what about fresh food? What about food that doesn't have a 4 to 6 month shelf life? What does it look like 5 months from now if nothing's come through the Strait of Hormuz? Let's look at this realistically. How many rich millionaire people want food out of a can? Do you understand what I mean? Let's look at this realistically. Rich people are going to be buying things like meat and produce and all of this stuff that they expect, replenished on a daily basis, that they want to put in the fridge. Yeah, not stuff that comes in cans and frozen food. So Iran's ability to starve almost the entirety of the Gulf region should be terrifying. Should be absolutely terrifying. Certainly that kind of northern part of the Arabian Peninsula that has to go through the Strait of Hormuz, that should be terrifying. Now, I'm not sure what the situation is with Oman and Yemen, but and the nations that kind of like border the more southern region of the Arabian Peninsula. They might have to come into play now, and they might have to start doing some more land trading in order to get food shipped to these various Gulf nations. But the bottom line is, he just said that 90% runs through the Strait of Hormuz. It's a big deal.
And what we're hearing right now is unlike anything in recent memory. Wealth lawyers across Singapore are getting flooded. One of them told us 6 or 7 of its 20 Dubai-based clients reach out in a single week. Average assets $50 million each. 3 are planning immediate transfers. 1 asked how fast he could move everything to Singapore. Not some of it, everything. Another advisor spoke to 13 UAE-based clients. More than half are serious about relocating. A family.
Now, to be clear, for, I guess, a nation that is, well, nations that aren't as cash rich as the Emirati nations and nations in the Gulf region, this could potentially really have detrimental effects on the economy. You know, essentially the entire corpus of rich, wealthy individuals withdrawing money from your local banks, you know, all at one go. I don't think it will have the same effect in the Gulf region as it would have in other global nations, because most nations aren't as cash rich. But if there's one thing that you've learned from the Gulf nations, is that they're incredibly liquid. So these people do have the cash to be able to pay these out. But, you know, these are huge sums of money. If you've got, like, you know, hundreds or even thousands of millionaires suddenly leaving and taking their entire portfolio with them, that would be a massive hit anywhere else. I think that these nations all would be fine on a cash basis. Also, I don't see their issue is not gonna be money. Even without oil revenues, it's not like they're gonna crumble after a few days or even months of not having oil revenues. They do have substantial reserves in terms of cash. They have substantial, all of these kind of like Middle Eastern nations have substantial cash reserves to keep them going. But the issue is getting goods in and out of the nation, getting that money out to places where it needs to be, and then getting goods in. That's the part that's difficult. And once again, losing that confidence from people who historically have seen you as the, that's all you had going. Let's be honest with you. The only thing these nations have going is that they're safe and they're tax-free. That's really it, safe and tax-free. Okay, if you remove any of those benefits, like if you suddenly start taxing people the same amount, people are going to leave. If you suddenly become unsafe, people are going to leave. That's the issue we have here.
Singapore and Hong Kong share something Dubai had but may have lost: the perception of stability paired with a business-friendly tax regime. No missiles hitting the runway at Changi Airport. No drones over Victoria Harbour. Both cities run on common law, both have deep banking infrastructure, and neither sits across the water from a country currently at war. The pattern isn't new. Beirut was the financial capital of the Middle East until a civil war in the 70s destroyed that image. Bahrain stepped in until Dubai outgrew it. Each time, the same thing happened. The money didn't disappear. It just moved to the next city that could promise safety. The question.
And that power has shifted because the West decided they wanted to demote, obviously invade those nations, remove regime change. Now, you'll notice the Gulf nations that remained, none of them are democracies. Okay, not a single one of them are democracies. They're all run by royal families, monarchies, or oligarchies. All of them. They're all emirates essentially. Okay, run by emirs, and the emir is essentially a king. Okay, an unelected king. They have prime ministers just to keep people happy, but the prime minister isn't holding the power. The power resides with the emirs in these nations. Okay, so all of these nations are dictatorships that play well with the West, but easy come, easy go. Now that is shifting again with this new conflict taking place, and what's going to happen is their short-lived time in the limelight seems to be shifting. Now, where it's going to shift to is going to be interesting. And this is where I think, and it's almost scary to say, because of how poorly this could be managed. But I feel like a lot of that, Nigeria and Africa essentially is very well placed at the moment. And this, I think, ties in with the video that I just did about Tinubu and, you know, the way he was received when he came to the UK. I think there's an acknowledgement now that with Dangote building those refineries, and if you haven't watched, maybe watch back the video I did on Dangote and the refineries, because I think it's important that people understand how those refineries work, and they don't necessarily benefit the nation the same way the refineries in the Gulf regions do. They're essentially nationalized, whereas Dangote's refineries are privatized. So there's some real question marks over how much all of that increased trade is going to benefit Africa. But I think Nigeria is really well placed, which is, I find that scary, because I don't think infrastructure wise and leadership wise, we're well placed to see that benefit the nation. The nation could continue to go down, and you could just see this massive, I mean, there's no point in talking about wealth gaps. There's already a ridiculous wealth gap, where you could just see this massive like well of corruption, just like uncontrollable corruption, where there's this humongous amount of money being brought into the nation and no development being done, which is, and that's the part that scares me, you know.
Now is whether Singapore or Hong Kong are the next city, or whether this is a temporary panic that settles once the missiles stop. The honest answer? Probably both. Some of this capital will come back if the conflict ends quickly. Dubai has survived the 2009 financial crisis, when property prices dropped 50 to 60%. It survived COVID, it survived floods in 2024. The city has a track record of bouncing back, but some of it won't come back, because what changed this time isn't the economy, it's the story. The Dubai entire model was the story. The entrepreneurs and investors who built their setup around Dubai didn't just have money there. They had companies, bank accounts, compliance structures, residency visas, kids in school. Rebuilding that somewhere else is expensive and painful. The fact
Essentially, a few years ago, it was impossible to buy property in any of those places. So, you know, in the Emirates, in Qatar, they just didn't let you buy property, particularly if you're an expat. But since then, they've invested heavily in, first of all, creating artificial islands, but also providing developments, normally centrally owned. So normally the land on the developments is land that has been leased by the government, but making this privately available land available to people who are not from the region. Now, this conflict makes all of that investment really unattractive. I'd imagine everyone is trying to get rid of their property now, because right now you're at a point where any kind of long-term investment in that region is a risk, and it's just about you weighing up how much risk you'd want to be exposed to. But any kind of exposure is a risk now. So yeah, the impact, the kind of, yeah, the impact is huge. The impact is very, very large, and it's going to be interesting to see how the economy fares as a result of this.
The fact that people are doing it anyway, right now, in the middle
One Love Souls, like, this is too much for the morning. Well, it ain't morning here, my dear. It's 1:30 p.m. in the UK. So
of a conflict at any cost tells you something about how deep the trust fracture goes. At Statris, we're seeing this firsthand. Founders calling us to restructure the company setup, open business accounts in Hong Kong, Singapore, reroute their payments. Not in 6 months, this week, now. This channel is where we talk about it, what's happening, what's changing, and what it means for your business. Hit subscribe if you want to stay in the loop. It takes 2 seconds, and it helps more people like you find us. There are dozens of places in the world with low taxes and business-friendly regulation. So why is the money specifically going to Singapore and Hong Kong and not, say, the Cayman Islands, Mauritius, or even London? Because what Dubai offered was never just a tax rate. It was a full operating system, a place where you could incorporate a company in days, open a multi-currency account, fly anywhere in 8 hours, meet your Chinese supplier on Tuesday and your European client on Thursday. A lifestyle, a network, a financial infrastructure, all in one package. Very few cities can replicate that. Singapore and Hong Kong can. Singapore has been quietly building itself into the world's most complete wealth management hub for the past decade. The regulatory framework is tight but clear. You know the rules don't change overnight, and the government doesn't depend on one industry to survive. GDP grew nearly 5% last year. The wealth management sector is expanding fast. Private banks that had been building out Dubai offices are now asking whether Singapore should have been the primary hub all along. And for entrepreneurs from India, Indonesia, Australia, or anywhere in Southeast Asia, Singapore is really the natural gateway. Same time zone, direct flights everywhere, English speaking, and a startup ecosystem that actually works. Hong Kong solve a different problem. If your business touches China in any way, you source products there, you manufacture there, you sell there. There is no real alternative. Hong Kong gives you access to mainland China through a system that still operates under common law. The Greater Bay Area, which connects Hong Kong to Shenzhen and Guangzhou, is where a huge share of the world's consumer goods are actually made. For someone who runs an e-commerce brand sourcing from Chinese factories and selling to Europe, Hong Kong isn't a Dubai replacement. It's the infrastructure layer that was always supposed to be part of the setup. Both cities also share something that sounds boring, but matters enormously when things go wrong. They work. The banking system don't crash when a neighboring country fires missiles. That's the part that Dubai fell on in the most literal way possible. And it's the...
So there you go. So he's talking here about the fact that Hong Kong and Singapore are natural alternatives. I don't think they'll be attractive for everyone. I think Singapore will attract people who are already in the financial industry, fintechs, Silicon Valley, startups. Those kind of organizations are going to be attracted to Singapore because of it has a very good, strong financial infrastructure. It has excellent regulation around those kind of things. You might find a few crypto bros and stuff like that will fly out to Singapore, and Hong Kong will attract those who are involved in the shipping of goods, essentially from China, obviously. So anyone who has that kind of company where they're shipping goods from China into the West or into, you know, somewhere else, and they're developing and manufacturing goods. You're next to all of the development, all of the kind of manufacturing hubs like Guangzhou and Shenzhen, like you mentioned there. So you've got two very different reasons. I don't think that covers everybody. There are some people who might, you know, end up in, you know, in France or something like that, or different places. But I think the bottom line here is the fact that Dubai and a lot of the Middle East is no longer attractive until it's safe. No one wants to be in a place. It can be the nicest place in the world, but the moment people get a taste of their potential mortality being at risk and or their investments being at risk, which to rich people can sometimes feel like the same thing, they're going to be out of there. They're not going to be chilling out there. And I know the interesting thing is Dubai has been doing their best to basically pay influencers and people who are out there to say positive things. And it's funny because you'll know when someone's being paid because they'll be very gushing about the Emir or the bigger Dubai and the Middle East. All of those nations have a massive issue with cult of personality. So I don't know if anyone's ever been down there, but if you go to those nations, you'll see the Emir or, you know, the Sultan or whoever it is, their picture will always be inside basically every business. It's actually a law. You know, so you go into a supermarket and the first thing you see is a picture of the Emir hung up and this, that, and the other. Wherever there's a kind of like a business that trades to the public, they have to have pictures of the Emir. So they suffer, I say suffer, they embrace the cult of personality in those nations. It's a way of them keeping themselves and keeping their nations kind of like playing ball and wearing this veil of the fact that they live in, you know, these people are going to take care of them or looking after them. And in reality, you really just got two classes. You've got the rich and the poor. They don't really deal with anything in between in those nations. It's the rich and the poor. And that's where they are at the moment. I mean, there's a lot of good content about this out there. If you want to look into it, this is a good video. It's called Dubai's Mass Exodus Has Started. And it was like I said, it was interesting for me because it looked at it from the financial perspective. And really, it's not going to take Dubai being flattened with missiles for its infrastructure to fail and for the entire experiment of it being this attractive tourist hub to go to pot. You know, it just takes a little bit of destabilization. You know, Iran just every week just kind of dropping a missile somewhere. You know, doesn't even have to land anywhere significant. Just every week, just enough to really disturb people's confidence in the region. And the trading will stop. The expats will stop. The investment will stop. The purchasing of real estate will stop, everything will grind to a halt, and then the nation is going to be once again entirely dependent on its oil revenues. So it's just an interesting watch.